In this video, I'm going to react to the worst NASCAR race ever. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. This is the place where I react to music, media, sports, anime, anything related to popular culture. I'll watch it with an open mind and give you my 100% honest reaction to it. And if you could please hit that like button early, I'd really appreciate it. Now this is going to be a really interesting video just because, you know, if you follow any motorsport, there's going to be races where you're not going to get the same amount of enjoyment as you did in a previous race. I mean, I'm someone who's followed Formula One for quite a while now, and yesterday's Belgian Grand Prix has to be probably the worst Grand Prix I've ever seen, or one of the worst. I mean, there was only 2 laps. Those 2 laps both, you know, were led by the safety car, and they still awarded points. I mean, it was just an absolute calamity. The FIA has a lot to answer for. I just don't know why you would give points for that. And they're not going to refund the fans either, you know, so the fans paid to watch 2 laps. But anyway, so I've always wondered what is probably the worst NASCAR race. And when I was recommended this video by Slapshoes, one of my favorite NASCAR YouTubers, I knew I had to watch it really soon just because, like, I imagine because NASCAR, it's not like F1 where there's certain tracks like Monaco that are really wide, I mean really narrow and hard to overtake. Like every NASCAR track that I've seen at least is wide, there's plenty of overtaking positions, plenty of space for overtaking. So to be called the worst NASCAR race ever, this has got to be pretty bad. So let's go. This is going to be me reacting to the worst NASCAR race ever. Let's do it.
Talladega Superspeedway has been shrouded in controversy for longer than most race fans today have been alive. You may think this all started in the late 80s with the introduction of the restrictor plate and the advent of pack racing, which led to the inevitable Big One accidents, making drivers and owners alike livid to no end. Some say it goes back even further, to the 1800s, when the Native Americans who lived in this place were pushed out by the U.S. Army during the Trail of Tears, and the natives cursed this land as they left. Centuries-old stories notwithstanding, the most well-documented story behind Talladega's troubled past goes back to the very first race in September of 1969. What ensues is a tale of Baptists and the United States Department of Defense, of boycotts and opportunities lost, of tire wars and tire failures, of greed and deceit, of workers' rights and of unionism.
Wow.
This was the very first race ever at Talladega Superspeedway, and it was the worst race in NASCAR history.
Good grief. That is a hell of an introduction. I mean, gosh, so much has happened, so much has transpired in the time from the first race until now. You know, all of the things mentioned by Slapshoes there. This is going to be interesting.
It was humongous. I thought Daytona was big, but then you look at that track, it looks like you could put Daytona inside.
Wow.
It's pretty horrifying to think that a guy had been out there running on something like that.
They said, we ain't gonna do this. Our neck's out there on the road.
Wow.
This car's going to be in the race. If you don't drive it, somebody else will.
Let's face it, I won the race, no doubt about it.
And when he said that to me, Leroy stepped from behind me and punched him in the face and knocked him down.
Hang on a minute, someone got punched in the face and knocked out? Holy shit. Man, I love this little montage here. I must say, Slapshoes does a great job editing these videos. Just really good job.
In order to tell this story, we're going to have to go back, like way back, like all the way to the beginning. This is Talladega Superspeedway, circa 1949. At this point, it isn't a speedway at all. This is Anniston Air Force Base in the small town of Anniston in Talladega County, Alabama. Originally opened in 1942 as a training school for the United States Army Air Corps during World War II, the post-war years for Anniston Air Base have not been kind. By the time the 1960s roll around, the airfields have fallen into disrepair. But the U.S. Army still needs it, because the Vietnam War is gearing up and they need to run ammo from the Anniston Army Depot out to the west coast. However, the city of Anniston and Talladega County can't afford it. They don't have the money and they don't have the manpower. Enter Big Bill France Sr., current president and CEO of NASCAR, who is looking to build the biggest, baddest track in the world in South Carolina. There are a few stories surrounding the original idea of the biggest, baddest speedway being built. Some say it's supposed to be built in Raleigh, other people say somewhere in South Georgia, but to me this one makes the most sense, and it is the one that has been the most popular over the years. Big Bill France wants to build a new track in a big market. He wants it to be even bigger and better than Daytona. So he makes the turns just a little bit steeper, the track just a little bit wider, and the length just a little bit longer. His target? Halfway between the existing tracks of Charlotte Motor Speedway and Atlanta Raceway. And Greenville, South Carolina is the perfect spot. It's right dead center in the middle. Just one hiccup with this master plan. South Carolina has blue laws on the books at this time. If you don't know what a blue law is, then good for you. You live in a sensible part of the country. Blue laws are essentially laws passed in heavily Baptist areas that pertain to what kind of activities you can do and not do during the Sabbath. And for Baptists, that is every Sunday of the year. Some of these blue laws are actually still in the books.
And obviously a lot of NASCAR races take place on Sunday, right?
Today, like in some counties in South Carolina, you can't buy beer on Sunday. And to this day, every liquor store in South Carolina is closed on Sundays. But back in the 1960s, they were a lot more all-encompassing. In some places, you couldn't open any kind of business on Sunday. And in most places, you couldn't hold a social or a sporting event on Sunday back then. And that was a statewide law, not just limited to counties. Bill France tries to petition the state legislature to change these laws, but to no avail. They're not budging. If you're wondering then how the Southern 500 at Darlington Raceway ever became a thing, well, that was because back in the day they used to run the 500 not on the weekend of Labor Day, but on Labor Day itself, a Monday. So Big Bill France packs up his stuff and he goes out to look elsewhere. Yep, South Carolina misses out on the biggest, baddest speedway on the planet being built in their state because of damned Baptists.
That's quite unfortunate. I mean, the revenue that would have been generated from people coming into the local area, buying things, possibly staying in hotels, food, entertainment, seems quite something to kind of let go just because of that law. I mean, couldn't an exception have been made? Maybe some kind of loophole exploited? But I'm sure he probably checked everything and there was just no way around it.
I could have had the craziest speedway in America built in my backyard, but nope, that didn't happen thanks to these jerks. Yet another reason to hate the Baptist church. I hate Baptists so much. They ruin everything down here. Ugh. So where does Big Bill France wind up? Well, he needs his track to be near some major markets, southern cities with big populations. He also needs the track to be near an interstate, like within 10 miles. A scout of his comes through for him. Midway between Atlanta and Birmingham, Interstate 20 is being built, and right next to it, Anniston Air Force Base, with all that nice, flat ground right around it. Big Bill agrees with the Department of Defense to pave new runways so long as he can have the old ones. They agree, and the city of Anniston sells the land to Big Bill France on very favorable terms. Everyone wins. Big Bill France gets his land, Anniston doesn't have to worry about that old run-down tarmac, and the Army can still run ammo out of the depot. Seems just a little too perfect, doesn't it? Bill France hires the same contractors who built I-20 to build his track. Construction has very few hang-ups and gets completed on time, but by design the completion date runs up dangerously close to opening weekend. The executive suites for VIPs and corporate sponsors, those are just open-air rooms with tables made from pieces of plywood over sawhorses. The patrons of those suites have to wear earplugs on opening weekend. Invitational testing runs, forget about it. The first tests are done on Wednesday, week of show, just 5 days before race day.
Talk about cutting it close. I mean, for the VIPs to not have any kind of protective glass shield to kind of shield some of the noise out. But I guess it kind of adds to the realism of it if you can hear the roar of those engines at their full capacity. I personally would enjoy it, but then again, I don't know quite how loud they are.
All the drivers pour into the track that Wednesday and they're impressed. Talladega is only 0.16 miles longer than Daytona and 12 feet wider, but it feels way more massive than that. They're in shock but excited. They can't wait to race. However, the first guys out on the track report some handling problems. Okay, fine, no biggie. They're using Daytona setups and this track's a little bit different, so they just need to make some adjustments. They come back to the garage after just a few laps at full speed, and this is what their tires look like. They're shredded. The track might as well have been paved with cheese graters. Other drivers report the same problem. No matter the car, no matter the tire manufacturer, they all have the same issue: bad tires. Now, at that time, NASCAR was in the midst of a full-blown tire war between Goodyear and Firestone. Chances are, if you're a NASCAR fan watching this video, you can't remember the last tire war in NASCAR, or don't even know what I'm talking about. A tire war is a horrible thing for any sanctioning body to go through, and I'm not even sure why they let them happen in the first place. Basically, the sanctioning body, in this case NASCAR, decides they don't like how much money their tire manufacturer is putting up to be exclusive manufacturer in the sport. So NASCAR goes shopping and finds Firestone, who put up a considerable sum to compete against Goodyear in NASCAR. NASCAR teams sign contracts with different tire makers, so you have Goodyear teams versus Firestone teams, and that sounds good, right? Competition is great, right? Well, not in this instance. The free market can fix most things, but this is not one of them. In order to get an edge over the competition, the manufacturers run up against the razor's edge of safety. A softer tire is more grippy and therefore faster but lacks durability and falls apart faster. A harder tire lacks grip and speed but lasts longer and is safer. A tire failure is one of the worst accidents a NASCAR driver can have, and they typically look like this. Pretty much head-on impacts with the walls at harsh angles. Plenty of drivers up to this point have died in accidents that look a lot like this, and injuries are commonplace in NASCAR in 1969. Nobody wants this, but when winning is on the line against safety, typically winning takes priority. That's just how people are. The last tire war in NASCAR was in the early 90s with Goodyear versus Hoosier. And tire failures were rampant in those years and led to many driver injuries and hospitalizations. Eventually NASCAR learned its lesson and there has not been another tire war since, but this is 1969, and those lessons are being learned in the heat of the moment, here and now, at opening weekend of the first race at the biggest, baddest speedway on the planet.
I mean, it's quite unfortunate that it takes a catastrophe for the right decisions, the responsible decisions to be made, unless they didn't foresee, the tire failures happening, which I doubt. I'm sure somebody within the NASCAR, hierarchy could suspect that, because each manufacturer is trying to find the edge over the other one, corners might be cut. Things that should never be considered are being considered. That decision to kind of put an end to this tire war should have been made before all of the accidents and, casualties. But sometimes, like I said before, it just takes a huge catastrophe for people to come to their senses.
The two tire makers fly in harder compounds overnight from their various warehouses across the country. Thursday comes around and there's still no progress. The tires aren't getting any better. They're still getting shredded to ribbons. Finally, Friday morning comes around and the drivers have had it. Neither manufacturer can come up with a tire that can handle the stress of 2-ton stock car bodies traveling at 190 miles per hour in the 33-degree banks. And that day, Firestone backs out. No driver will get injured or die on their tires. They cancel their contracts and allow teams to run whatever tire they want. Goodyear, however, stands firm. If they can weather this storm, they will win the tire war and be the undisputed tire maker for NASCAR for years to come. They figure the hit and PR from potential accidents is worth it to be the top dog in NASCAR's top series. As the day goes on, the Goodyear tires aren't faring any better in wear than the Firestones, and soon the drivers start looking to the newly formed Professional Drivers Association to help them out. Formed just mere weeks before the events of this race, the Professional Drivers Association, or PDA for short, is a cooperative of drivers who want a cut of broadcasting rights money, a pension program, and healthcare benefits. Now that sounds a bit like a union, but it's totally not. PDA makes sure of this, as they never call themselves a union at any point. Besides, they're not a union at all anyway. A normal union of professional athletes like the NFL Players Association or the NFLPA uses collective bargaining to fight for things like salary increases, healthcare benefits, pension programs, and organized strikes if need be. The PDA, on the other hand, vows to fight for salary increases, healthcare benefits, pension programs, and organized strikes if need be. Okay. It might be a union, but still the PDA never refers to itself as such.
I can see why they wouldn't want to refer to themselves as a union, because there's just so many, unfortunately, negative connotations associated with unions, even though, I am for unions, because they just provide individual employees with bargaining power they would never have without, their fellow employees next to them. So yeah, I can see why the PDA didn't want to be labeled as one, but maybe they should have just owned it and embraced it. I don't know. Who knows?
due to two reasons. One, union culture is pretty much unheard of in the South at this time, and even if the drivers were on board with unionization, there's no guarantee that NASCAR fans would have supported them. And second, NASCAR is very harsh on drivers who talk openly of unionization. The PDA isn't even the first attempt at NASCAR unionization. In 1961, NASCAR's two most popular drivers, Curtis Turner and Tim Flock, worked with the Teamsters to get NASCAR's first union off the ground, the Federation of Professional Athletes. Big Bill France responds by vowing that any member of the FPA will not be allowed to race in NASCAR. Curtis Turner quickly loses support, but he holds out for as long as he thinks he can. Eventually, Big Bill France uses the nuclear option, as he said he would, and he bans Curtis Turner from the sport for life.
Man, he dropped the hammer on that man. That's so unfair. That is so unfair. This editing.
This is not a punitive measure. This is to send a message. There will be no talk of unionization in NASCAR, no matter who it is. Big Bill France bans his most popular driver at the height of his career just to make a point. There will be no union in NASCAR, ever. So why does NASCAR have this seek and destroy policy when it comes to unions? Well, it has everything to do with how a union works. Leverage. Let's take a look at how a normal player strike would usually work in most sports sanctioning bodies. Typically, you have the sanctioning body, let's say the NFL in this case, aligned with team owners. The NFL sets salary caps and determines who can and cannot own an NFL team. If you own a team, let's just say, for instance, the Buffalo Bills, and try to sell them, you can't just sell them to any random yahoo off the street who throws enough money at you. The NFL has to approve the new owner. There are only so many teams allowed to compete in the NFL, and the NFL decides who gets to own what team and where that team is located. Even if you own that team, you can't move it to a different city without the NFL giving you the green light. The NFL and the team owners are, for all intents and purposes, basically one and the same. On the other side, you have the players who work for the teams basically as contractors rendering their services. If the players don't like their salary or benefits packages, they can collectively get together in a union and threaten a strike to leverage the owners in the NFL to give them what they want. If that doesn't work, then the NFL and its owners can just hire a whole bunch of replacements to play the game if they don't want to budge. NASCAR, on the other hand, is completely different. In 1969, most drivers are owner drivers, which is exactly what it sounds like. Not only does the guy drive the car he owns, but he also owns the team as well. He decides which of his crew to hire and fire, nails down sponsorship deals, and what races he wants to run. It would be like if Tom Brady was not only the quarterback for the New England Patriots, but was also the team owner and the GM, and got to pick who his coach would be. The board is totally lopsided. The players and the owners are now one and the same. And NASCAR teams can come and go as they please. Right now, today, if you own enough money, you can go start a NASCAR team and run races. So long as your cars pass tech inspection and post a qualifying time fast enough to get into the show, NASCAR basically just has to let you compete. And NASCAR can't hire replacements either. A NASCAR stock car is a proprietary car. It can't run anywhere else. It is purpose-built to run according to a NASCAR rules package only. You can't just go buy one off the street and have some yahoo drive it. However, in 1969, the PDA is allowed to coalesce because NASCAR has way more eyes on it. They have a much bigger fan base than they did earlier in the decade, and as a direct result, they have bigger stars too. And literally every single star driver is part of the PDA. David Pearson, the Allison brothers, Cale Yarborough, and basically every driver worth talking about save for Bobby Isaac.
I'm glad that, the PDA actually took off and has, had gained strong support and membership, just because it really seemed unfair when that previous driver was banned for life just for joining the union. Oh, that is just, I'm still not over that. That is just it's such overkill. I mean, dude, you could have spoke in private and came to some kind of compromise, but to ban him for life? Whew.
Who is a bit of a loner who has a record of flying his own colors. And who might the president be of the PDA? Well, none other than the king himself, Richard Petty. France can't bring himself to do anything about the PDA because they got way too many cards in their hand too quickly. They got the drop on him, and he can't do anything. So he does exactly that. Nothing. He never acknowledges that the PDA even exists. Journalists ask him about the association and he feigns ignorance, just like it's some fairy tale. If he can't punish the drivers in the PDA, then he'll just act like it doesn't exist to eat away at their credibility. However, the PDA is just as ill-prepared as Goodyear and Firestone to deal with this situation. They hold all the cards, but they don't know how to play them. So the drivers take matters into their own hands. They approach Big Bill France and voice their concerns. It's not about pay or benefits, it's about safety and safety only. They want to postpone the race until a tire compound can be made that can withstand the brutal loads at Talladega. Bill France says no way. They have to race on the original date.
So he's like, I don't care about your safety. You guys are racing no matter what. Man, this guy sounds a bit like a douche to me so far. Like, doesn't sound... I know he's putting, profits. He's thinking about, the viability of NASCAR. But, dude, you can't put the lives, of your racers at stake. I don't know.
Won't admit it to the drivers, but he's in debt up to his eyeballs from having to build this place. Those bare bones suites we talked about earlier, Bill France doesn't even have the money to complete those. They were built at cost by the contractor on the agreement that the contractor could make a suite for himself, a suite that he still owns to this day, except it's a lot nicer these days, of course. The race has to go off on race day because a postponement means not making his money back as soon as possible, which is why the completion date ran so close up to race day in the first place. He has to have his money back now. Big Bill France isn't budging, but neither are the drivers. Little cliques start getting formed all over the garage. They're trying to discuss amongst themselves what they think they should do. Do they stay and hope Goodyear can bring in good tires, or do they continue with the protests and say they're not going to run? Some drivers even talk openly about a potential walkout. Bill France tries to ease tensions by buying an old race car and taking it out for a few laps, just to show that there's nothing wrong with the track. Instead of easing everybody's tensions, he only makes things worse. Drivers point out that he was only puttering around at about 160 miles an hour, well short of what they were doing out there. Bill says, well, why don't you guys just race at that speed then? But that's just a slap in the face to say something like that to a racer. It's an affront to everything racing stands for. Even if they tried that out there, somebody would push the envelope and somebody else would respond and they'd all wind up racing at 190 miles an hour anyway. At some point during these group powwows on Friday, Bill France is talking it out with Bobby Allison and Leroy Yarborough. When Big Bill France says to Bobby Allison, 15-time winner in the NASCAR Grand National Division at this point, and the winner of the last race just a week prior, quote, I think you're just afraid to race. At this point, according to Bobby Allison, to this day, he says that Leroy Yarborough stepped out from behind him and swung and hit Bill France in the face, putting him on the ground. Leroy then turns around and says to his group, boys, pack up your stuff, we're leaving. That was the trigger the PDA needed. All at once, every single PDA driver packs up their stuff and leaves Talladega Superspeedway.
Whoa.
They will not die for Big Bill France's big, dumb, stupid track. There are only 3 holdouts. 1, the aforementioned Bobby Isaac, who sees an opportunity to make a run at the championship points lead now that all of his competition is left. 2, a non-PDA driver named Jim Vandiver driving for a team owned by Ray Fox. And 3, a PDA driver turned scab who will race anyway. His name is Richard Brickhouse. He races for the same team as Bobby Isaac, a factory-owned team financed by the Chrysler Corporation. And Chrysler Corp wants to debut their brand new car, the Dodge Charger Daytona. A car supposedly capable of speeds exceeding 200 miles an hour. But this week, that won't happen. The tires just won't allow it. Next year, it will dominate the schedule and win the championship. In 1971, NASCAR will ban its use entirely. But here in 1969, Chrysler just wants someone...
Why was it banned? Like, anyone who knows why that car was banned, let me know in the comment section. Wow.
...to drive their car for their flagship team. The car owner of the number 99 Dodge approaches Richard as soon as the walkout happens and tells him, if you don't drive this car on Sunday, somebody else will. Thus, that is his reason for turning scab and not participating in the walkout. Honestly, if you were in his shoes, you'd find it hard to say no too. You have a chance to win your first race and show off in this brand new Dodge Daytona. It's an opportunity that only comes once in a young racer's career, and that's if you're extremely lucky. Richard knows this and vows to race on Sunday. Had NASCAR been, say, a Midwestern or Northeastern sport instead of a Southern sport, somewhere where union culture existed, then there wouldn't have just been a walkout. There would have been a picket line and appeals to the fans to boycott the race. But this is Alabama in the 1960s, and organizing something like that is all but unheard of. The drivers in the PDA never try to picket. As a matter of fact, the topic is never even brought up. The drivers never even think to make a picket line. They just pack up and head home. NASCAR fans aren't too sure what to make of it. So Big Bill France makes sure to tell them what to think about it. He offers up an unbeatable deal. If you buy a ticket to the Talladega 500, then you can use that stub to get into the Daytona 500 next year. The fans jump on it. They come in droves to watch the shit show in Talladega County in September and get free tickets to Daytona in February to boot. But what about the race itself? You can't just put 3 cars on a 2.66 mile speedway for 500 miles, right? You're exactly right, Bill France says to himself. So he goes and raids the field from the 400-mile preliminary race on Saturday, a race from a completely different series. They race sports cars in that division, not stock cars. Instead of Chevelles, Torinos, and Roadrunners, they race Camaros, Mustangs, and even one AMC.
It just seems that this guy, Bill Francis, is just making decisions on the fly without much thought or consideration. Literally just literally on the spot decisions, playing, but with high consequences, I can just see something going horribly wrong.
Javelin. They can barely do 160 with the wind at their backs, let alone pass tech inspection. So what does France do? He just changes the rules. That's it. He just does it like it's totally normal. Just declares all the cars legal, and that's that. So there it is. 3 actually competitive cars being driven by 2 young guys no one's ever heard of, and Bobby Isaac, NASCAR's biggest loner, and a field full of cars well off the pace. The stage is all but set for a disaster to occur, and it does, but not in the way you'd expect. That tire problem we've been talking about, at the last second, that morning before race day, Goodyear flies in some new tires, and they held up surprisingly well. There wasn't a single tire failure that day. And the lower division cars filling in the field, they're running the same tires they ran the day before without a single issue. And I don't mean the same sets, like they had several sets of tires they would change out during the race. No, they pitted for fuel in that division only. These guys ran an entire race for 400 miles on a single set of tires and then turned around and did another 500-mile race the next day with no issues. Just what did they make tires out of back then in 19...
Dude, are those tires made out of titanium or something? Indestructible.
1969. Anyway, as the race starts, Bobby Isaac's riding easy because he's making a run at this championship and just wants to grab some easy points. He finishes 4th that day, which means one of those underpowered pony cars ran him down that day because he was just so laid back out there. Shouts out to Ramo Stott then. Richard Brickhouse and Jim Vandiver are running 1-2 all day long, and according to the radio call, which someone bothered to record, they voiced some confusion in the running order and then announced that Jim Vandiver was the leader.
Jim Vandiver in the lead. Here's Richard Brickhouse getting around Jim Vandiver as he goes around, so that gives him advantage there. He's made up one of those laps, Ned. That should put him back in the same lap with the leaders, Bob.
That's right, we have a potential scoring error even though there are only 2 competitive cars out there on the track. Later when the checkered flag flies, NASCAR announces Richard Brickhouse as the winner. Vandiver and his car owner Ray Fox are livid. They contend to this day that they won that race that day, and that the scoring error wasn't an accident. I can't confirm this, but it really wouldn't surprise me if it turned out to be true, but the rumor persists that it was Chrysler Corp that sweet-talked Bill France into inventing the scoring error, because they wanted their new model of Dodge to win over Jim Vandiver, who was driving the older model. It probably would have looked bad if the brand new 1970 Dodge Charger Daytona had lost to the old 1969 Dodge Charger. Yeah. Despite the protests, Richard Brickhouse is declared the winner and Jim Vandiver is placed in 2nd. Richard Brickhouse would enjoy his win about as much as you would imagine, but all 3 of these drivers who did not participate in the walkout would wind up being cursed in some way. Bobby Isaac would go on to win the 1970 championship in the winged Charger Daytona, but in 1977, he would park his car in the middle of a 200-lap event at Hickory Motor Speedway and collapse. He was resuscitated and taken to the hospital where it seemed as though he had made a full recovery, but later that night he would die of a heart attack caused by complications from heat exhaustion. Richard Brickhouse and Jim Vandiver would never go on to win another race or even be competitive. As a matter of fact, in the very next race, Richard was spun out by a PDA driver who had walked out of Talladega. And this picture depicting the incident was taken so clearly because a PDA driver had told the photographer where to stand in order to get the best shot. The PDA disbanded just a few weeks later, their best shot at getting some leverage now long past. No talks of unionization ever came up after that race. There was no need to have them. It was their best shot and they had failed. Not to mention the owner-driver has gone the way of the dodo bird. The chances of a NASCAR union getting off the ground these days are slim to none. So that was all there was to it. The worst race in NASCAR history. A brand new car no one got to see the full potential of that day. Only 3 competitive drivers, 2 of the 3 of which nobody knew about. A field full of filler cars. A tire scandal that was resolved at the 11th hour. And of those 2 unknown drivers who were competitive, no one knows which one actually won the race to this day. This was truly the worst race in NASCAR history, bar none. Thanks for watching.
Gosh. I mean, man, just... what an absolute calamity. Bill Francis, it's like every bad decision he could have made, he made it. I mean, he just randomly decides to, you know, allow things that really shouldn't be allowed. You know, instead of actually designing a track like with every detail in mind, he just takes existing designs and just makes every attribute a bit more extreme. Like the gradient's a bit more extreme, it's a bit more wide, it's a bit longer. You know, he's legalizing certain cars to be able to be raced even though they shouldn't be raced. He's, you know, banning people for life, you know, for just for wanting to start a union, something that's, you know, in many other sports. Just, yeah, he was really the architect of his own failure here. He brought it all pretty much on himself. Really great video from Slapshoes. Really enjoyed it. Like I said, he's one of my favorite NASCAR YouTubers. Just, I mean, what a story. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, and keep throwing the recommendations my way. I know I say it all the time, but they genuinely help me out, because if I know you enjoyed watching something, I'll definitely enjoy reacting to it. So like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, keep throwing the recommendations, and I'll catch you in the next one.